Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the main lessons I've learned after 40 years of horse riding. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Emma and I have a diploma in sports psychology, a few business degrees. I've been riding for over 40 years and I've competed, bred and trained horses for the best part of that time. If you're new here, welcome to my channel, which is dedicated to helping you navigate your horse riding journey with a little bit more confidence and to feel like you're not alone. And I hope that by making this video, you're going to learn something new or find a way to have a better relationship with your horse and the people who support you in your riding journey. So let's get started. So one of the very first things I learned in my riding journey, I was probably about 11 years old. And that was to concentrate on what I was doing and not what everybody else was doing. I was so worried about all the other kids, what fancy ponies they were on, what wonderful saddles they had, what, horse trailers and trucks they arrived in. And I remember my dad sitting me down because we weren't the most resourced family at the time. We didn't have great big huge $200,000 horse trucks, and I wasn't sitting on $50,000 ponies. Really, probably quite the opposite. But my dad sat me down and he said to me, "You know what, Emma, it doesn't matter if you're not arriving in the most fancy truck in the parking lot. And it doesn't matter if you're on the fanciest pony. If you work hard and you're dedicated, you will get there in the end." And it was quite a pivotal moment for me. He also told me to stop worrying about everybody else. He said, if you're pouring all of your energy into what everybody else is doing, you're not pouring your energy into what you're doing. He said, focus your energy on yourself, not everybody else, and get on with your own riding journey and performance. And it was a really good pep talk for me. If you want to progress and do well, forget about what everyone else is doing. Focus on what you're doing. Don't worry about everybody else. The second lesson I learned, and I learned this from one of my coaches when I was about 14, and I did actually have quite a good horse at the time. My parents didn't pay a lot of money for it, but it was a top horse, or it had at least proven itself, and I got it for a bit of a bargain, to be honest. But I remember my coach telling me that you can't buy a seat. And basically what that meant is you can have the best coaching, the best horse, the best resources on the planet, but if you don't put the hard work in as a rider and just spend time in the saddle, you're never going to be a top rider. And you cannot buy your seat. You literally can't. And I remember seeing riders in my life, who have been bought really great horses, but they just can't ride because they're not putting the time and the effort in. And I'll tell you a little story around this. One day I was on the train to badminton horse trials and I got chatting to a young South African Grand Prix dressage rider. Now, he was in the UK because he had been invited by the Spanish riding school in Vienna to potentially go and be an apprentice. And I said to him, my gosh, that's the most incredible opportunity. Those riders are insane. And he said, but Emma, I'm a Grand Prix rider already. I don't want to go through their training program. And it was rigorous. He told me what the Spanish riding school interns do is they spend 8 hours a day on a lunge line with no stirrups and no reins, and they do that for over 12 months before they even get to pick up the reins themselves. Now, many would consider this as a Grand Prix rider a bit of an insult, and he certainly did. But to me, I thought, well, this is just exactly that. You can't buy your seat. And when you watch the Spanish riding school riders, they do not move. And there's a reason for that, because they have spent many, many hours in the saddle, literally with no stirrups and no reins. So it's absolutely true. I don't care how much money you have. If you're not willing to put the time and effort in, you will never develop the most perfect seat on the planet like the Spanish riding school guys. So just think about it. Next time you're at a competition, you see someone turn up in their fancy truck with their fancy horse, they have not bought their seat. They have to put the time and the effort and the energy in to get there. And if you've done that, you're 10 steps ahead of them. Okay, number 3. Too many riding lessons are actually not necessarily a good thing. And I see this all the time, particularly in wealthy circles and particularly in the environment I'm in at the moment. You see people who are actually essentially being overcoached. Wherever they are that week, they're getting a lesson. Some people are getting lessons every time they ride. Some people are getting lessons in the warm-up arena at competitions. Okay, fair enough, to help you warm up your horse. But some of these coaches are actually coaching in the warm-up arena just before you're going into a dressage test or a show jumping round. That's just not helpful. So when we have too many lessons, we actually do not become a thinking, feeling rider, and we don't question ourselves enough when we're riding. If you're having a lesson pretty much every time you ride, somebody else is doing the thinking and observing for you. And often it becomes really problematic because you see riders now that actually can't even warm themselves up at a competition without having a coach 3 steps away from them. Or they can't even develop their own training schedule and program. When I was riding at a national level as a teenager, my parents could afford 1 lesson a week if I was lucky, and that was during the summertime, which was during the season. In the winter, I was on my own. I very rarely got lessons through winter. And this meant that I actually had to be a rider that took as much as I possibly could from each lesson and worked on my homework relentlessly and often questioned myself when I was riding. Are my hands correct? Where am I looking? What does my lower leg look like? How am I feeling? How is the horse feeling? Is he feeling good? Is he feeling not so good? I had to constantly question all the time and really think about what I was doing and how I was riding and how the horse was going. If you're overcoached and you have too many lessons every week, and particularly at competitions, you actually don't develop an expertise as a thinking, feeling rider, and it's highly problematic. If you're getting too many lessons, and I'd say too many lessons is probably more than 2 or 3 a week, then you probably need to check yourself. Same at competitions. If you've got a coach barking orders at you just before you're going into a show jump arena, it's probably not so helpful. So just think about the amount of lessons you're getting and how thinking you are as a rider, and go from there. So number 4 is beware of the gossip brigade. Conversations like, oh my God, did you hear about XYZ and the new horse they bought? It's totally broken. Or, oh wow, did you see Emma at that show jumping competition? She fell off and bombed so bad and there's something wrong with the horse, or she can't ride, or whatever number of conversations you may be party to or witness to. What I want to say to you is don't get involved. Don't be one of those awful people that gossip about others, because again, it takes your energy away. There are 2 things you should be thinking about when you're riding or in your equestrian journey: yourself and your horse. And if there's a coach in the arena with you, definitely your coach and what they are saying. And I think it's quite problematic in the horse world in general when people just gossip about each other. And I really want to encourage you to just be supportive of people around you. If you support other riders, they'll support you, and it's just generally a way nicer environment. Stay away from toxic people is probably the main message here. They're not nice and they don't bring a good vibe to the sport at all. And you know what? You need to bring a good vibe to yourself and your horse, but also to others around you. So congratulate people when they win, commiserate with people when they bomb out, and be helpful as well, particularly at competitions. If you're not riding and you're standing on the sidelines, go pick up a pole. I mean, I know some competitions have staff, but a lot of competitions I go to, there's no staff. And if I'm standing on the sidelines and a pole goes down in a show jump arena, I'm right out there picking poles up. It's a real pet peeve of mine to see people standing around. Okay, now I'm ranting, but to see people standing around watching one person all afternoon pick poles up or run around. So get muck in. It will make you feel good. If you finish your riding for the day, get involved and be positive, and don't be part of that awful toxic gossip brigade. It doesn't do you any favors. Okay, the fifth thing, I can speak, I promise, you need to be aware of is that, people are going to take your money. Incompetent people are going to take your money, and they're going to tell you what you want to hear. And I see this all the time. I want you to be really aware of the credentials of anyone you are using in your equestrian journey, whether that's a body worker, a coach, a vet, just anyone who is coming to assist you with either your horse or your riding. And I'll tell you why. There are coaches out there who are wholly incompetent, and they will take your $80 or $120, $150 an hour, and they'll tell you exactly what you want to hear. They'll say, oh, Emma, you're doing fabulously, you're amazing. Or, you know, they'll body work your horse and they'll charge you $200 for the pleasure, and then they'll say, oh, I need to come back in 2 weeks because, you know, it's super sore there. But then when you get somebody else to it, there's nothing wrong with it. Be very, very careful. Be vigilant. Check people's credentials. You know, be aware of courtesy bias. Courtesy bias is when somebody offers you a socially acceptable opinion, even though it's not actually what they truly think. And you see this all the time, particularly in coaching circles. They'll tell you to your face you're amazing, and then they'll turn around and tell somebody else that you're utter crap and, you know, you need a new horse. Be aware also of flattery and pandering. So flattery is when somebody is like over complimentary. It's really over the top, and you see it all the time. You know, you see people being flattering others and it's not genuine. So be aware of that. And flattery is used to gain favor with you, you know, so that you come back and spend more money. You know, oh, your horse is lovely, or oh, you know, you did such a good job today. And then pandering is when somebody appeals to your existing beliefs, even though they might not necessarily believe it themselves. Very similar to courtesy bias. Pandering is when somebody says to you, oh, what a wonderful horse you've bought there, when in actual fact, you know, they think it's a terrible horse. So, you know, just be aware there are charlatans out there. They will take your money. They will tell you what you want to hear. They will also take your money and tell you you need to come back for more treatment, you know, in a week, which is total bollocks. Just be aware, be vigilant, look out for it. And I'll tell you a little story. So years ago, I was adjusting at a really nice facility, and there was a woman out there who owned a really nice buckskin horse, actually. It was a youngster. And I was out there tacking up, and this woman arrived. She considered herself a body healer. That in quotations, a body healer. And she proceeded to walk around the horse. She didn't touch the horse for 45 minutes, clapping. She was like, doing this. And I was a little bit intrigued as to what she was doing, and I asked her out of just sheer interest, actually, and I said, oh, what are you up to there? And she said she was removing negative energy from the horse's body, even though she hadn't touched the horse. And then she proceeded to charge the woman who owned the horse over $200, I kid you not, for the pleasure. And I said to this woman who owned the horse, you know, do you find any benefit from this? And she said, oh, well, I'm not sure, but, you know, she's this, that, and the other, and she's a body healer, and she's been doing it for 10 years, and she was recommended to me, and so we'll see how we go. But really, I mean, if you have a healer who's not necessarily touching the horse, I'd be a little bit skeptical. I mean, don't kill me in the comments, all you natural people who think this stuff works. Maybe it does, but I suspect it doesn't, and I suspect over $200 for the pleasure is a lot of money to spend, but that's just me. I'd rather go with a chiro and a physio, you know, but, you know, you make your choices, I guess. Okay, number 6 is one of my key lessons, and probably one of the most important ones I'm going to impart to you over the 40 years that I've been working with horses. And that is that you've got to work with the horse that's in front of you today with few expectations. And I'll tell you why. All horses are different. They have good days, they have bad days. Some horses are super consistent, some horses are super inconsistent. And the point here is that if you have particularly a young horse, some days they go really fantastically well, and other days they're an absolute nightmare and a real challenge. So I have learned over the years to work with the horse that's in front of me on the day. I've got to remove my ego, remove my expectations, really, have goals for sure, but as you swing your leg over into the saddle and sit down for that day, just remind yourself, I'm going to ride the horse I have in front of me today, not the horse I'm expecting to have in front of me today. And it will actually completely change your riding journey and the way you approach each lesson. Remember, all horses are actually quite individual. Some are more timid and require a gentle approach. Some are not so timid. They're a bit more robust and a bit more in your face, and they require a different type of training. And the principles of training horses is pretty much the same, but you have to be adaptable, and you have to remember that horses are individuals and not machines, and they don't operate like machines. You know, you go to a competition one day, you're winning everything, and the next day you're losing. And that's the nature of the sport, and you're going to have to get used to it. So another thing I want to talk about is Teachability Index. And how teachable are you? Now, we've spoken about coaching and the fact that you can be overcoached, but also, does your coach enjoy coaching you? I've coached plenty of riders, and some I absolutely love to coach, and some are absolutely miserable to coach. And, you know, it's a reflection on how teachable they are, how they listen, how they adapt, how they change their ride depending on what I'm asking them to do. So the Teachability Index is really something that measures how willing you are to learn and how willing you are to change to accelerate your learning. It also helped me see that without changing my behavior, learning would be a waste of time. So you can see here in this graph that there's a direct correlation between your willingness to learn and your willingness to accept change. And your willingness to learn is basically how willing you are to take information and knowledge. And your willingness to accept change is how you manage to adapt and grow through this knowledge. Some of my students, for example, I ask them to go and do some planking, 3 minutes a day. Doesn't matter how they do it, it just has to happen 3 minutes a day. And the significant change that I see in the riders, even after a few days of planking, versus the riders that don't bother, is marked. So, for example, the others that have not bothered to do the planking I've suggested, those people have a low teachability index. They're not willing to be educated and taught, and they're not willing to do something different to improve. And it really makes a difference. So ask yourself the question, how teachable are you? How willing are you to accept change or take on other people's ideas in order to help you grow? If you have this growth mindset, it will absolutely change your equestrian life. And don't forget, seeing I'm almost 3/4 of the way through this video, I've forgotten to ask you, if you're enjoying this content today, please like and subscribe to my channel. Your help and support really assists me personally on getting the motivation to keep making these videos for you. So I really appreciate it. Thanks. So the last one I have for you is about controlling your emotions, and that is controlling your emotions in and out of the saddle. Now, we all at times lose our patience, lose our cool, get upset when we're in the saddle, and, you know, to the detriment of the horse sometimes, and you see it often, particularly at competitions, under pressure. What I want to tell you today is this is one of my biggest life lessons with riding, is to control my emotions. When things aren't going well, just stop and check yourself. If you need to get off to cool down and cool off, do that. And we need to understand also, you know, horse riding is one of the most emotionally demanding sports on the planet. One day you're winning a national title, the next day you're being thrown in the mud. And you know what? It's the same with horse management. 1 minute your horse is on track for the next competition, and the next he's thrown a shoe or an abscess, or he's pulled up lame, or he's run through a fence. And you know, through all of this is one thing I've learned, that whatever the sport throws at me, I just have to adapt. I've got to take it all with a pinch of salt as much as I can and move on. And I have reminders daily from friends and family that, you know, horse riding, this is supposed to be fun. Even if you're gunning for the Olympics, it's still supposed to be fun. And I think as horse riders, we can take things a little bit too seriously. Just remember, for most people, this is their hobby. It's, you know, they're not a professional. And I have to remind myself that every single day. I do get a bit intense, particularly with my training. And in terms of horse management, I've got a story for you. It was 5 a.m. one morning, and I was just about to wake up to take my horse to a show jumping competition, my lovely horse Dee, and I speak about her a lot. She's literally my heart horse. And the phone rang, and it was the lady where I just stood. She said, "Emma, you need to come straight away. Your horse is injured, and it's really bad, so you need to come now." So I hopped in the car, I got out to where I kept my horse, and there she was in the yard, tied up, standing there dripping in blood. Literally, I had to call the vet. And in that moment, I couldn't get emotional. I had to actually concentrate on the horse and her needs. And I had to be there for her in terms of making the right decisions for her at the time. She was an absolute mess. What had happened was she had actually gotten a fright in the middle of the night. She'd run through a fence and she'd taken out a huge retaining post. It was about 30 centimetres or almost a foot wide, and she'd gone through it in the night and through the fence. And it was horrific. I actually don't know how she didn't kill herself. And the only thing I could do in that moment was keep calm, call the vet, stand there, hold her for the vet, and hold space for her in that moment. Make sure that she had all of the treatment that was available. Make sure that her recovery was absolutely perfect. It took 12 months to rehab that horse, and I had to be patient. I had to spend 12 months rehabbing the horse. I couldn't ride her for 6 months. She was bandaged for 5 of those months every day. Dressing changes. It was what can only be described as an absolute nightmare. But you know what? I couldn't get emotional about it. I had to just carry on and put the horse first, not my own emotional needs. And I think sometimes as riders we forget that these horses rely on us for their health and welfare and care. And if we're putting ourselves first, it's kind of problematic. So just remember, the horse always comes first. Control your emotions. Take care of the horse first before you worry about yourself. In most cases, unless you've fallen off and broken your neck, of course, then maybe you need to take care of yourself. But aside from that, that's all I have for you today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Again, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will link another video up here which I think you might enjoy, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.